Hi folks, this is meteorologist Joel Curtis with your Alaska weather. Starting out with our watches, warnings, and advisories, they're all in the Fairbanks forecast area. We have a winter storm warning from Point Hope all the way down to Russian Mission. This is for snow and blowing snow. It should be into Friday. Wind gusts 30 to 45 miles per hour and 1/2 mile visibility at times. We have a winter weather advisory for the interior of the Seward Peninsula, the Yukon Delta, and along the North Slope for snow, blowing snow, wind gusts to 40. And some of these advisories will be through Friday. Others will last, like along the North Slope, into Saturday. And then we have a wind advisory along the entire Alaska range, both west and east, and that'll be till 3 p.m. on Friday. Wind 30 to 40 miles per hour, and we should see a few gusts to 60. So, starting out with our satellite loop, we have an old low near the Gulf of Anadyr, and it's moving northward. Lots of cloud bands along the west coast, and then we can also see another weather system forming into the eastern Bering Sea. And then we have another low down southwest of Unalaska Island, and still another one south of Shemya on the satellite loop. So starting out with today's weather, we've got a 990 millibar low in the Gulf of Anadyr. That's moving north, causing snow and blowing snow along the northwest coast. We have a low just off of Coal Bay in the Bering Sea, 988 millibars, and there's lots of warm air out in front of that, and that warm air is hitting Kodiak Island, south central, and moving on up along the west coast. And then we have that other weather system south of Amchitka there. It's about 980 millibars, and it too has some warm air out ahead of it. Then for tonight's weather, the low has now moved up into the Chukchi Sea. It has formed a cold front across the northern Bering Sea. It's very weak and will be falling apart again. Lots of warm air coming up along the western half of the state and into actually the south central and the north Gulf Coast. A weak frontal system associated with a 994 millibar low near Nunivak Island, and some warm air out ahead of it, and not all that cool an air that's coming up to the Alaska Peninsula. And then we have that developer that's now down to 983 millibars, and that's near Adak, and there is some warm air out in front of that, and a little bit cooler air behind it. So for Friday's weather, that Adak low now develops to 982 millibars, approaching the Pribilofs from the southwest. Cooler air is now working its way to the south of the Aleutians, and some warmer air out ahead of the system, now creeping further and further east in the Gulf for some mixed precipitation that's now moved along the northeast Gulf Coast. Also, that warm air going aloft over the western interior is causing some snow showers and continuing those advisories. And then we have the low now is stalling in the Chukchi Sea at 999 millibar low. It's stalling up there and causing a little precipitation along the North Slope. For Saturday's weather, we can see that now we have quite a frontal system in the Gulf of Alaska, a 998 millibar low near Middleton Island, which is a good pattern for some precipitation in south central. Also, precipitation with that frontal system is moving now into the Panhandle. Snow at high elevations, rain at lower elevations, and some mixed precipitation down through Lower Cook Inlet and across Kodiak Island. And then we have a weather system that's now developed south of Shemya, 979 millibars, and there is some warm air out ahead of it and some cooler air working in behind that system to the south and to the west. So let's start with our low temperatures Friday morning. First for the Panhandle, mid-20s to lower 30s and 21 at Skagway. Mid-20s to lower 30s and up to 37 at Homer, 37 at Kodiak, 7 at Golconda, and 27 at Talkeetna. And then as you work further west, you can see mid to upper 30s. And then for low temperatures Friday morning along the north slope, negative single digits as you get further east, but 21 near Point Hope, 26 for Kotzebue, 24 for Nome. Then as we move further east, you can see some single digits in the Yukon Flats. Also 4 for a morning low at Fairbanks, 22 along the Alaska Range, 32 for Unalakleet, and 12 for St. Lawrence Island, 27 for the Yukon Delta. And for the southwest Friday morning, as we go out along the Aleutians, all the way from 40 and then dropping off into lower 30s and even upper 20s for the Pribilof and Shemya. And then for high temperatures Friday afternoon, we're looking ahead to mid-30s and lower 40s for the Panhandle. Same thing for South Central, 19 for Golconda, and look at those lower 40s for the western portion, Lake Iliamna and Lake Clark areas. And then we have single digits for Friday afternoon for the eastern north slope, but all the way up to 24 near Point Hope, 29 for Kotzebue, 30 for Nome, and then 35 for Unalakleet, 15 for St. Lawrence Island, 21 for Fairbanks, and 31 along the eastern Alaska Range, and down to 6 at Northway. And then for southwestern Alaska on Friday afternoon, temperatures again in the 40s as you get into the southwest, and starts to drop off a little bit into the mid-30s as you go out, including the Pribilof, and for Adak, 36. And then for a low temperature Saturday morning for southeast Alaska, we've got 21 for Skagway, 27 for Juneau, all the way up to 35 when we get over to Sitka, 32 for Yakutat, 7 for Golconda, and as we get into South Central, the lower 30s prevalent with 36 at Kodiak and 34 at Kodiak, 36 at Homer, and then drops off into the 30s as you get further west. For low temperatures Saturday morning, we've got single digits along the north slope up to 13 near Point Hope, 22 for Kotzebue, 23 for Nome. As you get further east in the Yukon Flats, you got a low temperature of -6, 1 for Fairbanks, 18 as you get down into the Alaska Range, 27 for Unalakleet, and plus 10 for St. Lawrence Island, 23 for the Yukon Delta. And then as we get for the southwest on Saturday morning, we can see lots of mid-20s to lower 30s as you get into the southwest, and then the mid-30s dropping off into the upper 20s as you get further west, 28 for the Pribilof, 29 for Shemya, 29 for Adak. So our high temperatures Saturday afternoon, looking for 31 for Skagway, mid-30s as you get down into the Panhandle, 40 for Sitka, 38 for Yakutat. Coming over to Golconda, we got 14-degree high temperature, mid-30s, and even touching on 40 as you get into South Central. And as you get on the other side of Cook Inlet, on the west side, you can see 39, 38, and 37 for Dillingham. And then our high temperature Saturday afternoon along the north slope, single digits, 26 for Kotzebue, 7 for the Yukon Flats. We also see that the Seward Peninsula, 19 to 24, Nome, 30, St. Lawrence Island, 16. And then when we get over to Fairbanks, it looks like a high temperature of about 20 degrees. For the Alaska Range, 34, so into that above freezing area. For Unalakleet, 32 and 29 for the Yukon Delta. And then for the Southwest on Saturday afternoon, we can see temperatures in the mid-30s. As you go out the Aleutian chain, you can see 38 for Alaska Peninsula, including Sandpoint, 36 for Coal Bay, 39 for Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, 33 for the Pribilos, 38 for Adak, and 34 for Shemya. So just a quick review, we've got winter weather advisories and a winter storm warning for much of the Fairbanks area of responsibility. So please check with them to see if there are any updates on these important advisories. And thanks for tuning in, and please stay safe out there.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Aviation weather, starting out with our flying weather for Friday morning. A mixed bag of IFR conditions, marginal VFR and VFR across the state for our whole time period here. Starting out with our IFR mainly along the west coast down into the Aleutians, and also for southwestern Alaska, Kodiak Island, and into Prince William Sound. Then for Friday afternoon, that IFR still maintained along the west coast, including in Pribilos and St. Lawrence Island. Some over the southern approaches to the Brooks Range, also for the Alaska Range, and then down for Kodiak Island, eastern Kenai Peninsula, and Prince William Sound, including on over to Cordova. And you can see some IFR forming for Chichagof Island. Then on Saturday morning, IFR maintained along the north slope, along the west coast, into Bristol Bay, also for the Alaska Range, Lake Iliamna, Lake Clark area. As we go over to the Kenai Peninsula, southern and eastern Kenai, Prince William Sound, and then much of the Panhandle is socked in IFR. For Saturday afternoon, IFR along the west coast, not as extensive. Some into the Brooks Range, also along the north slope. Some for the western side of Cook Inlet as you get into the mountains, Lake Clark, Lake Iliamna area. Also for northern south central, as well as along the coastline, all the way along the Gulf down into the Panhandle. For our past conditions on Friday, Anaktuvik, IFR. Adigan, IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR. Rainy Pass, IFR, and expect turbulence. Windy Pass, IFR. Isabel Pass, IFR. Mentasta Pass, VFR. Tanita Pass, marginal VFR, and expect some turbulence. Expect turbulence in the morning for Portage Pass and IFR conditions. For Chilkoot and White Pass over in southeast, VFR deteriorating to marginal VFR in the afternoon on Friday. For our freezing levels, we have one area of 2,000 feet along the north slope. Also, most of the state is at the surface. However, we do see the 2,000-foot freezing level has moved into southwestern Alaska, including the Alaska Peninsula, southern Kenai, and touching the Gulf Coast as you get farther east. That 4,000-foot contour is over much of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, and lots of warm air out into the Gulf of Alaska. For icing, much of the state has isolated moderate below 4,000 feet. However, we do have one area of considerable moderate between 3,000 and 10,000 feet for western Cook Inlet, Lake Clark, Lake Iliamna area, Kodiak Island, and Prince William Sound. For our jet stream, we have 90 to 95 knots over Bristol Bay and southwestern Alaska, up to 70 knots as you get on the west side of Cook Inlet. Also, we have 70 knot southerlies as you approach the Chukchi Sea. For our 9,000-foot winds on Friday, we have lots of 45 knot winds over the central interior and especially over the lower Yukon area. Up to 55 knots over the northern Alaska Peninsula, and that's due to that low pressure system approaching the Pribilos. and then 50 knots or so as you get south of the Akpen, and marginally 30 knots out of the northwest for the Panhandle. For a 30,000-foot winds, we have a low-pressure system ramping up 50 knots as you get out into the eastern Bering Sea. Also some 45 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, and dropping off to 35 knots as you get further north, and 30 knots barely touching the Panhandle. For our turbulence on Friday, we have below 6,000 feet for much of a considerable moderate turbulence. Below 3,000 feet as you get further north, and we have a couple of pockets of isolated severe turbulence down in the eastern Aleutians and on up into the Alaska Peninsula, and that will be below 6,000 feet. And we also have an area of considerable moderate turbulence in the Cook Inlet area and the Kenai Peninsula below 6,000 feet, and also one area of considerable moderate out in the central Aleutians below 3,000 feet. That's it for aviation weather.
Greetings, fellow stargazers. I'm Trace, and I'm here to help you find the teeny planet of Mercury, which is in its greatest elongation right now. Head outside after sunset and keep a sharp eye out for a tiny speck of light about a fist's width above the horizon. That's about 10 degrees. That speck should follow the sun as it sets and then disappear beneath the horizon too. That little speck is sun-soaked Mercury. Throughout the year, each planet hits elongation, their furthest distance from the sun as seen from Earth. Mercury finished its great western elongation in November 2020, crossed in front of the sun, and will hit its eastern elongation on January 24th. Then it'll swing behind the sun for the next western elongation on March 6th. Because Mercury orbits closer to the sun than us, it can be tough to spot zipping back and forth around our nearest star, but now that you know where to look, you can say hello to my little friend and keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
You have a lot of pilots. In fact, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft.
No.
Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets and they're cold and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid. And that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image, this is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer. And in the stratus layer there was a lot of those super cooled liquid drops or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And so the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now this is really cool. It's really cool to be able to identify that. There is, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would happen, sun doesn't shine all the time, unless, I guess, if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those super cool drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, of course, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
It's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we've had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right?
Yeah, here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at.
Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
For the area from the Kuskokwim Delta all the way up to St. Matthew Island, there's been about a 20 to 30 nautical mile retreat of the ice edge. As far as Cook Inlet goes, if you look at detail in the map, the mass in the middle of the inlet is all out near Nikiski or so, and it's out in the middle. So, for Friday's marine forecast, first for southeast. On the outside waters, relatively light winds, 10 to 20 knots, and seas up to 10 feet. On the inside, variable wind directions, 5 to 15 knots, and seas up to 3 feet. For Saturday's forecast, on the inside waters, 10 to 20 knots, and seas up to 5 feet. And then on the outside, we start seeing some minimum gales, variable directions, but as you go further north, southeasterlies and seas up to 15 feet and 16 feet in the south. For south central, southeasterlies starting to kick in, 15 to 20 knots, 25 knots on the outside, seas up to 12 feet. Prince William Sound, easterlies 20, seas 4 feet. And for Cook Inlet, 20 to 30 knots out of the northeast and seas up to 9 feet. For Saturday's forecast, gale force up to 35 knots on the outside, seas up to 15 feet. Prince William Sound, southeasterlies 30, seas 7 feet. And then we have a mixed bag of directions for Cook Inlet, but up to 25 knots and seas up to 7 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, on the outside waters, Pacific side, 25 to gale force 35 knots, seas up to 18 feet. Chillicothe Strait, easterlies 20, seas 5 feet. And on the Bering Sea side, 30 to 35 knot wind gales and seas up to 9 feet. And then for Saturday, we've got westerlies coming around 30 to 40 knots and seas up to 24 feet on the Pacific side, and up to 35 knots and seas up to 14 feet on the Bering Sea side, all westerlies. For the Aleutian chain, we've got wind ranging from 20 to 35 knots on the Bering Sea side, wind seas up to 10 feet, and on the Pacific side, seas up to 22 feet. And then for Saturdays for the Aleutian chain, wind coming around again, mostly easterly, so split flow, though in the east, you've got 30 to 40 knots and seas up to 23 feet. And in the west, you've got 25 to 30 knots and seas up to 12 feet. For the west coast, variable wind directions, but 15 to 25 knots, seas up to 9 feet down by the Pribilofs and 6 feet south of St. Matthew. And then for the west coast on Saturday, northerlies circulating around a low. We've got 15 all the way up to 25 knots and seas up to 9 feet by the Pribilofs and 7 feet south of St. Matthew Island. Friday's marine forecast for the Arctic coast, the easterlies 25 to 30 knots, and then as you get toward the Chukchi Sea, southeasterlies 15 to 20 knots, and then through the Bering Strait, northerlies 15 knots. Then moving on to Saturday, easterlies 20 to 25 knots along the north slope, northeasterlies 15 to 20 knots for the Chukchi Sea and getting down to the west coast, and then through the Bering Strait, northerlies 20. So a recap of the weather coming up. I've got a couple of weakening lows, one that's moved into the Chukchi Sea, another one near Nunivak Island, and a third one down by the Adak. And then moving into Friday's weather, now the developer is approaching the Pribilofs, quite a frontal system, a lot of warm air in front of it, precipitation moving onshore and creeping further east with time. And then for Saturday's weather, quite a frontal system, westerlies in the Gulf, lots of rain in the Gulf, but as soon as you get onshore and get some higher elevations, changing to snow. And then a new weather system, 979 millibars in the western Aleutians. That's all the time we have. Thanks for tuning in.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.